People, I want to take a look at these verses. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now, the incredibly fascinating verses from Surah Taha. Now, Surah Taha, those of you that, if it's not fresh in your mind, then when you can, if you can, uh, after the show, if you can tomorrow, just take a look at it. Taha, this surah, it has an amazing kind of rhythmic awe to it. Ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa. Allah. And this is what what is transmitted, that Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu an was really awestruck by. It was Surah Taha when he first converted to Islam. Now, it's an amazing surah, and it has this kind of this it has a style about it that is brief, so it mentions things just concisely, but they kind of like they pack a punch when it's said. So yeah, so this from verse 17 to 21, it's addressing this a particular incident about Musa alayhi salam, and it's the incident to do with when Moses has received, he's encountered divine countenance, and he has received revelation. He has interacted with the transcendental divine. So Allah has communicated with Musa alayhi salam. And you've got the whole burning bush incident. Now, after that, you have these verses, and I just want to, just looking at whatever fresh eyes people bring to the verses are so giving back in turn. So let's take a look at this. The verse begins that وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا مُوسَى قال هي عصاي أتوكأ عليها وأهش على غنمي ولي فيها معارب أخرى قال ألقها يا موسى فألقاها فإذا هي حية تسعى قال خذها ولا تخف سنعيدها سيرتها الأولى. Let's go back through these verses. وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا مُوسَى. Allah. And what is that in your right hand, O Moses? Allah, Allah. This is going to be interesting. Because why is that a question? What is that in your right hand? Allah. So, okay, let's take this first of all with just its meaning. So you have just the apparent meaning. Allah is asking Moses, what is that? And I'll bring up the translation again. The translation's right beneath it. And what is that in your right hand? Moses answered, this is my staff, my stick. I lean on it when I walk. And with it, I beat down leaves for my flock, and I have many other uses for it. Allah said, throw it, O Moses. He threw it, and behold, it was a snake active in motion. Allah said, grasp it and fear not, we shall return it to its former state. So, okay. So you look at this verse, and this is about perspective. So, on one level, this is speaking about a miracle. This is what it's speaking about. So many people look at this and they'll say, well, okay, this is Allah had asked Moses alayhi salam, what is that? He said, it's my staff, it's my stick, rod. This is what I do with it. I lean on it. I attend to the flock of sheep with it. I carry stuff on it. I've got other waliya fiha ma'arib ukhra. I've got other, I do other things with it. And Allah says, well, okay, I'm going to now reveal the power of the miracle. Throw it. Musa alayhi salam throws it. It turns into a snake. Naturally, Musa alayhi salam is frightened. Allah says, it's okay, fear not, hold it. And as you do, this will turn back into its first state, which is the rod and the staff, the stick. Okay. And then Musa alayhi salam repeats this miracle at a later face to face with the Pharaoh, a kind of encounter with the Pharaoh and the magicians. And it's a well known incident. So, okay. So, from one perspective to people, this could be speaking about the unfathomable power of Allah, His Qudra, to turn a staff, a stick, into a snake, a living snake, by a miracle. So this is the glory of God. So that's one way to look at this, that this is referring to an incident of a miracle, what people call a mu'jiza. Okay. Another way, well, people could look at this same verse and say, well, okay, did it turn into a snake? And that's a discussion on, do the laws that Allah has set in nature, does He violate His own laws? Or do things just come together at a certain time? So there's another verse of the same incident, and it mentions كأنه, that that it is as though it is from the Jan, it is from the snakes, it is from it is as though it's a snake. Okay, so some people could say, well, okay, from another perspective, maybe there was something to this. Maybe there was a kind of trick that, let's say, the magicians were using. I mentioned this many years ago. I said that this was one of the explanations I had given at the past, saying it could have been that, you see, when the magicians were making things turn into snakes, they weren't actually making them, but there was a certain trick that they were exposed to. And some historians write that they used mercury and different, some of the mufassirin, sorry, write this in the Quran, that they, in the tafsir of the Quran, that they used to use zibaq and this kind of stuff, mercury and liquid mercury, and it would do something. And so maybe this is somehow it's being shown to Moses that this is, and so what he does is he actually exposes their magic, as opposed to bringing a more powerful phenomenon of apparent magic to them. So that's one way, because one way a person could say, well, you see, if the magicians came and did magic, and Moses came and turned it into a snake, and they killed the snake, ate their snakes, then in a way, to the spectators, they can't really tell the difference. They can just tell that his magic was better than their magic. So what it does by, what it does as a side effect or a byproduct, is it affirms magic, but it just affirms that Moses' magic was better than their magic. That's one way of looking at it, because it could be like, well, because to the common person who was spectating at this great event, they can't tell. They think, well, when the magicians throw the sticks and it turns into snakes, to them it seems like, whoa, okay, that seems like it's a snake. Now, if Moses came and did the same thing but just outdid them, let's say his really turned into a snake, but theirs also perceptibly turned into a snake. So that to the bystander, because this says, the Quran says that it would be a spectacle for people to watch. So they all gathered. So the people couldn't tell, except they could just tell his version was more powerful. So that, one may argue, is simply, by as a byproduct, it's affirming that might is right, that the greater one always wins. One could argue, one could maybe counter that by saying no, but that's how Allah works in His world of um, His laws of nature. He breaks them at times, and He does them in that way. That's the wisdom. Sure, I mean, however people want to understand it. Some people might understand this as this is a testimony to the glory of the power of God, that He is doing a miracle. And other people may say, well, okay, but that may be a bit, I don't know if that adds up it adds up here, but I don't know if it adds up there, because then the spectators wouldn't really be able to tell. So it makes more sense, as the Quran says, فَبَطَلَ مَا كَانُوا يَأْفِكُونَ. So what their tricks became invalidated. Batala. So, okay, because he exposed the truth, that ultimate power just lies with God. These people have no power. It was but just a trick. So, okay, that's one way of looking at this verse. But, okay, here's another perspective on this same verse, you see. And I know I've discussed this in the past as well, that there's a plausibility that Moses may have been Akhenaten. Now, there's a plausibility. Obviously, I'm not saying we can't say these things. Nobody can claim certainty, or even good enough certainty. There's a plausibility when you look at the evidence, because Akhenaten is the person, a pharaoh. Now, keeping in mind, Moses would have been a kind of pharaoh, in the sense, if you mean a pharaoh is royalty. So pharaoh in Arab, obviously in Arabic is Fir'aun, but in Arabic we use it as a name almost. But that's not what it was. It meant the great house. That's what Far'ad, that it meant the great household. So whoever, the palace of the pharaoh, so to speak, meant this was, if you were of that, you were a pharaoh, you were of the great household. And Moses obviously grew up as a foster child to the Fir'aun, in however you want to place it. So so to the outsiders, he would have been of the household. He would have been obviously royal. Like if you grew up in Buckingham Palace, um, you're royalty. It doesn't matter. So the word pharaoh for them was like royalty. And obviously they tried to they had their own belief system as well, but I'm just using the word here. So okay, there's a plausibility that Moses may have been Akhenaten. Akhenaten was the first pharaoh to destroy all the other gods in the temples and say the one God. And there's huge overlapping kind of stories. The problem is the pharaohs try to diminish. They try to try to kind of eradicate and erase his history, because they were really upset with what he did. But there's these stories of him also involved in an exodus, because he sets up a separate town called Amana, which became the Amana kind of kingdom then, and there's other things, which is huge similarities he leaves with a certain people as well. He sets up but okay, let's take a look at this hypothesis. Moses was from the household. Let's say if he is Akhenaten. When Akhenaten leaves, now there's a certain point, you see, Akhenaten leaves and he goes, and there's obviously different stories about Moses' time. Some people say this may have been after he'd got in some kind of trouble. There's the incident in the Quran about him killing someone, but it doesn't mention more. It just mentions, about him killing someone. When did this incident take place? Obviously, people debate it. They're not quite sure. Is it later on? Is it at the same time? Is it? But let's say Moses has gone off and now he's received revelation. But According to this hypothesis, the pharaohs after Akhenaten are not from the royal household. They're the generals in the army. Horemheb and these others become. I think there's maybe 4 or 5 that in between they become the pharaohs, but they are not like. I think Horemheb is the most vicious, but they weren't royalty before. They were just military generals. So in this incident, Akhenaten or Moses, let's say he goes off. Now he spends many years away in the wilderness. He goes off in the Quranic story, in the Bible story. Moses goes for at least 10 years to Madian and he stays away and all of these things before he comes back. When you see the incident here is what would have he had that signified this royalty? Because Horemheb and the other pharaohs who took over after him, they weren't true royalty. They were just military generals. And when Moses comes back, let's say he's this man with this beard and he's 10 years and he's aged and he looks different, but he has the royal scepter. You see, the staff of the pharaohs, and according to certain descriptions, the staff of the pharaoh had this serpent on its head. And in light of this hypothesis, and I'll tell you who is it, Ahmed Osman in his book, he speaks about this hypothesis. He's one of the first people to, I think there's 1, 2 others, but he authors several books on it. If you want his book, it's called Moses and Akhenaten. And so he has this whole thing. Now he brings this verse as well to our attention, saying that it's interesting in the Quran, Allah asks Moses to throw the staff. And lo and behold, it's a serpent. Now, one way to look at this, so this is a different perspective. This Akhenaten hypothesis, for example. Allah is asking Moses, وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا Musa. You see, because Moses in that hypothesis held on to it. You see, he didn't let go of this royal scepter. He took it with him. And it was always a remembrance of who he was. And in that way, this verse seems ever so interesting that Allah says that, وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا Musa. What is that in your right hand, O Moses? And keeping in mind that Musa is not actually Moses' real name. Even Jewish people, some say maybe it was a name given because it meant Moshe from the river, but Moses most likely meant son of. Like the pharaohs were called, like you have Tutmosis, you'll have many of these Moses. Moses was like an add-on, but they say that the reason they called him Moses was almost to negate any royalty. It's as though it's like saying almost Abdullah, but then they just call you Abd. So وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا Musa. And what is that in your right hand, Moses? And then what begins is almost a series of justifications. Oh, this here, Asaya, this is my staff, it's my, ahushu biha ala ghanami, that this is, sorry, atawakkau alayha, that I lean on it and I carry, my burden on it. And some people say atawakkut can mean about carrying, like a traveler would carry stuff. And some people say atawakkut, to lean on. And I lean on it. And I attend to the flock of sheep with it. And and I've got other tasks with it. It's almost it's a beautiful sense of justification almost that, right, I'm this is why and then it's that فَأَلْقِهَا يَا Musa, throw it. And then as it kind of gleams and just lies shining, let's say, in the sun, you see it for the royal scepter, the serpent, the snake, of what it is. And the historians like Ahmad Usman, who have this Akhenaten hypothesis, will say when Moses came back and the people were casting the snakes, they were trying to do their tricks, he held up his scepter and everybody knew that Akhenaten had returned. That's a different angle of this, of looking at these verses. So okay, this is one way. Now another perspective. So let's go with, see, this is what I'm saying, that the Quran, it brings, what every person, they come, they read it, they take something away from it. Now check this, many of the mystics, how they did tafsir of these very verses. Let's go back to him. Now this is amazing. You're going to love this. Check this out. Moses has received revelation, and he has now been entrusted with this very weighty responsibility of bringing these people of God, the Israelites, to to a separate land where they can worship freely. Okay, it's a very difficult task. Now, Allah says, وَمَا تِلْكَ بِيَمِينِكَ يَا مُوسَى. What is that in your right hand, Moses? Moses says, oh, this, hiya asaya. This is my staff. That atawakkau alayha. I lean on it. وَأَحُشُّ بِهَا عَلَى غَنَمِي. My flock, I use it to tend to the flock. وَلِيَ فِيهَا مَآرِبُ أُخْرَى. और भी बहुत से काम है. I've got so many other things. This is indispensable in, or it's so helpful, in. Here Allah is reminding Moses, as these many mystics explain to us, that, Ya Musa, how can you rely on anything, lean on anything, use as a means of reliance anything other than Allah? That this is not the way of pure tawakkul. That atawakkau alayha, I lean on it, I tend to the flock with it. Only and only Allah. That alqiha ya Musa. Throw it. Distance yourself from any illusory sense of dependence and reliance or comfort that is but an illusion of this dunya. Alqiha ya Musa. Lose yourself of these mediating games of this world. فألقاها, he threw it. فإذا هي حية تسعى. The mediums of this dunya are in essence, and the dunya by extension, a serpent. That they have no ultimate loyalty with you. At any moment, they will sting you. They will poison you. They will strangle you. They will cripple and destroy you. Your reliance must at all times be only Allah. And when he saw the serpent, he's frightened. But it's it's scary because that is the brutal God perspective on the reality of this world. That this dunya is brutal, it's frightening almost. But then, not if you have tawakkul. Allah. Allah says, خُذْهَا لا تخف. Don't, because when you're in the world, you must live in the world by the world. You must use the asbab. But keep in mind at all times, Allah said, سَنُعِيدُهَا سِيرَةَ الْأُولَى. Pick up the staff, pick up this reliance, this illusory, mediating instrument, which for a moment has distracted you from your true reliance only on God. Pick it up. We will return it to its instrumental aperture and its features. But remember that true reliance is on Allah alone. Allah. That is just mesmerizingly beautiful and so powerful as a concept. These very same verses, so many ways to read them, and they give so much meaning to everyone, and maybe infinitely more meaning to other people who bring their perspectives to the amazing verses of the Quran. These, somebody said, where is this? This reference is in many of the mystical, the mystics, mufassirin. So you'll find it in Ruh al-Bayan. You'll find it in others as well. There's a great website. I do use it. It's called, I just have it on my thing. Great Tafsirs, I think. It's called greattafsirs.com. It's in Arabic. And on there, you can select the genre of tafsir you want. Do you want fiqh? Do you want this? Do you want... so if you pick the one that is mystical with the Sufiya, so it'll bring up several tafasir then, but they'll only bring up those tafasir. If you select that genre, it'll bring up like Qushayri. In fact, even Qushayri makes reference, I believe, to this point as well, that this is it's a metaphor. But it'll bring up Ibn Arabi, Ibn Ajiba, it'll bring up Baqali, it'll bring up like Ruh al-Bayan, it'll bring up, it brings up a few of these. So it's amazing. These things are there, but it's so, put that references aside, it's so amazing that when you just look at these same verses, what they serve you as an insight. I hope that's been of some help, people.